Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm recording on December 12th. I'm doing a simulcast with my channels and with Spaces. For the ones on Spaces, I appreciate you logging in and listening. I'm going to be going over specifically President Gay, who's the president of Harvard, and her potentiality of being removed a lot quicker than I thought, and why she needs to be removed. I have several different videos that will be played to give some context, and then I will do my opinion at the end. Maybe even if I can control myself, maybe I'll give you my opinion while I'm playing the videos. I don't know, because I am the New Yorker. All right, so let's begin. Let's start with an incident that took place on Berkeley, even though this is primarily about Harvard, but to give it some context and how this is going to blow up for Harvard, especially for the Harvard Corporation. This is dealing with Berkeley and a lawsuit that just was filed. All right, so I'm gonna turn on the speaker here.
Groups are suing the University of California over what they call unchecked anti-Semitism. The complaint is among the first high-profile lawsuits against a university in response to this war in Israel. Newsmax correspondent Addison Smith is live in San Diego. He's been covering this story for us. Hey, Addison, great to see you.
Hey, John, great to be with you. This lawsuit was filed in San Francisco federal court on Tuesday and accuses UC Berkeley and its leadership of fostering an unsafe environment for Jewish students on campus. Now, the group behind this lawsuit is the Brandeis Center, the nonprofit Jewish advocacy group. They claim that Berkeley's campus had a surge of on-campus displays of hatred, harassment, and physical violence against Jews, which UC Berkeley has emphatically denied. Videos like these, however, shared with Newsmax, purport to show a glimpse into some of these incidents. One of a student trying to tear the Israeli flag from a Jewish student, and another captured moments after a pro-Palestinian reportedly struck a pro-Israeli student over the head with a metal bottle. And on top of this, some student clubs, like the Journal of Gender, Law, and Justice, have bylaws that explicitly prohibit pro-Zionist speakers from affiliating with them or going to speak with their club. Newsmax spoke with Eliza Lewin, the president of Brandeis Center, who explained why she feels that this is unacceptable in higher education.
You have 23 student organizations that have adopted bylaws where they have said Zionists are not welcome to speak to their clubs on any topic. We're seeking an injunction from the court that they should have the university prohibit that. They have what they call an all-comers policy. They have to enforce that all-comers policy.
Meanwhile, Berkeley is not the only California town to draw ire this week. On Monday, Open California's City Council debated a resolution to support a ceasefire in the Middle East, in which residents specifically throughout the council expressed support for Hamas.
There's not been beheadings of babies and rapings. Israel murdered their own people on October 7th.
Calling Hamas a terrorist organization is ridiculous, racist, and plays into genocidal propaganda that is flooding our media and that we should be doing everything possible to combat. I support the right of Palestinians.
Meanwhile, for the ones that are on X, these people that are up on the podium, saying all this negativity about Israel, are wearing masks. These are the ultra liberals that I'm talking about, where the head is gonna be eating the tail, and that there is a judgment that's happening, and there's a disentanglement between the good and the bad, the conservative versus the ultra liberal, and there's going to be a blessing on people that pick the right side, and there's going to be a curse that people pick the wrong side. And these individuals that are coming from this Berkeley environment are extremely liberal. But here's the problem: this issue with DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, all right, and affirmative action, and all these different departments that they have, is so pervasive around the country. It's not just the elite schools. The focus is on the elite schools, but it's in the state schools. It's everywhere. It's a huge, huge problem. And what's happening is conservatives forget about it being an anti-Semitic issue. Conservatives throughout the years get shouted out of an auditorium, you know, during a guest speaker arrangement, or there's protests to the point where it's unsafe and they cancel the event. This has happened so many times to so many conservative talk speakers. See, what's happening is that there's this division that the schools are trying to create, where it's the oppressed and the oppressor. If you're white and male, you're an oppressor. If you're black and female, you're the oppressed. See, they're trying to create these divisions within these schools. How can you have an open debate when most of your faculty is an ultra liberal or liberal, where only 3% of your faculty is conservative? How could that be an open debate? It's already stacked. And oh, by the way, President Gay over at Harvard used to be the dean of the biggest department at Harvard. She hired these people over the years. So when you hear in this video that there are 300 or more faculty members supporting her, I think it's like 360, could be even more, writing a letter supporting her, 97% of the faculty is liberal or ultra liberal. That's a stacked statistic. And many of them she hired. So there's no bias there. People need to wake up. There's a crazy ultra liberal thing that's happening. It just so happens that this event in Israel is having all this stuff that's been underneath the surface of society. It's coming out, and people are seeing it now. So don't get caught up. Don't fall for the emotional fallacies and all this stuff. See for what it really is. It's conservatism versus ultra liberalism.
Including through Hamas, the armed wing of the unified Palestinian resistance.
This has led to swift condemnation from the general public, especially pro-Israeli groups, who are calling on elected officials to condemn that rhetoric that we saw in that city council meeting. John, back to you.
All right, so that's to lay the foundation that these schools, especially Harvard, are worried about a few points here. One is their performance on their portfolio, which President Gay has no bearing on. She can't control that. The donations and the pledges relative to budget, and potential lawsuits, and what does the government find during these audits. These schools are going through are being threatened to go through an audit. I believe one audit's already happening. They're going to find stuff where there's impropriety or a bias. And if they do, that's going to launch other lawsuits or other potential criminal activity that might be investigated. And the Harvard Corporation and the Board of Trustees is scared shitless about that. All right. Let's go to Fox Business, and this is an individual. His name's David Portnoy. I don't know who this guy is. Maybe he's a known person. I don't know. I don't know who this guy is. So let's see what he has to say.
Barstool Sports founder, the man himself, is with us. First, I have to get your reaction to the Otani deal. Does it make sense economically, do you think?
Yeah, it must make sense for the Dodgers, right? They're not giving away free money. People always complain about these contracts, but if somebody's willing to pay, they must think it's going to make sense. And like the reporter just said, the international interest, somebody thinks they'll make money with it or they wouldn't have done it.
Does it enhance baseball? Because baseball's been slipping these days. I mean, sport number one is football. Sport number two is basketball. I don't see baseball getting back into the top two American sports anytime soon. But they do need a headline star like this, don't they?
Now,
Yeah,
this
I
is
mean-
just my observation where, they were talking about a few things. And then right after this little piece, they're going to go right into the Harvard, MIT, UPenn issue. But I find the juxtaposition of this really important. Back in the day, all right, baseball was a major pastime. I would say that even when I was a kid growing up, I would say baseball was the American pastime in sports. It changed, and it went to basketball and football, primarily dominated by blacks. And this transition took place around when hip hop and rap was starting to take hold in the United States. All right. There was this kind of push with rap at around, I want to say around 1985. Rap was kind of started to get some notoriety, but it really exploded when MTV Rap started their shows, right? So you had during the 80s, what was called the new wave. All right, that was The Cure and kind of like this pre-alternative kind of music, right? So there was the new wave that came out, and then this kind of like Guns N' Roses comes after, and that's the age of the hair bands, right? That's like 87, 88, 89, right? And then that was promoted with Headbangers Ball from MTV. Then they transitioned to Yo MTV Raps, and rap exploded. And during this time was this transition from previous American pastimes that seemed to be wholesome, all right, to a point where you had a society that it was spiraling with drug culture and this inner city rot, and it was promoted. It was promoted with MTV. So this rap culture is part of the problem, and you look at some of these really, really good. I don't even like basketball, but if for these really good basketball players today, and you compare them to, let's say, the way Michael Jordan behaved, all right, they're totally different. Totally different. The really, these basketball players that are top of their game, they act like hoodlums. There's a hoodlum-esque mentality. You see it with the football players too. So this transition, even though it was accidental on Fox News, is a little hint of the problems that we're seeing in society, where you got people that can't pull up their pants, that are part of a drug culture that is hurting America, the destruction of the family unit. And everyone is in this mode with the young crowd that's watching all this, independent of if they're black or not. This young crowd that's watching it thinks that, it's easy to be, the whole goal of life should be just be a millionaire and just don't be a productive citizen. There's a problem of losing that some of those core beliefs and that foundation of America about God, country, and family. You don't have God, country, and family in rap. You don't have God, country, and family in some of these hoodlums that are superstars at football. You don't have God, country, and family in basketball. You don't have God, country, and family, listening to the cesspool of social media. It's a problem. And this is why we have the problems that we have in the inner city. You got a bunch of blacks that can't pull up their fucking pants and learn calculus and be productive citizens, because what they think success is to be a hoodlum and shoot some b-ball. It's a problem. But no one calls them off on it. But if a student was on campus at Harvard and said what I said, they would have to be either suspended, or the DEI, group would come in and say, you can't say that, Dr. Paul Cottrell. That's so mean. But it's the fucking truth.
Already in the league. I guess he's in a bigger market, LA compared to Anaheim, but I don't think this changes the base of baseball or anything like that.
Okay. How about anti-Semitism on college campuses? You will not hire anyone from Harvard, UPenn, or MIT until the school's dean step down. Has anyone from these schools applied to work with you?
Yeah, well, first of all, we already have Harvard grads, so they're grandfathered in. But in the Penn dean, President McGill, she stepped down. Yeah, a lot of people reached out, but I think it's not only me. I think a lot of leaders have to do it. It was disgusting what those deans and presidents did under oath. Makes no sense to me. I don't know how, if you can't condemn genocide, I don't care whether we're talking Jews, Muslims, any group of people, then you don't deserve to be, in a position of power. You got to get out.
What about free speech? Does that come into this?
Yeah, listen. Is Hitler allowed to say, I want to kill the Jews, I want to kill the Jews, I want to kill the Jews, right up till he kills the Jews? I would say no. That's what they're saying you can do in this country. There's a difference between free speech and hate speech. And when you're endangering people and causing harm, I think you got to put a stop to it. It's called common sense.
Okay, we always like to run through a whole gamut of subjects with you because you've got an opinion on everything. So how about this? I want to talk about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. We know you're a Swiftie. Is she changing football viewership?
I don't care about Taylor Swift. All right. So the real answer to that is that these private schools can put more pressure on the student body on what the student conduct should be on campus. They already do it with what is called the finishing schools for the college. So for the ones that don't know, for the ones that go to Harvard College, there's these finishing clubs. All right. And it's hard to get in. All right. Certain clubs. And these are kind of like a club that helps, their club members throughout their career. All right. And so some of these finishing clubs are really prestigious and it's really important to try to get into. And it's fascinating. Even J.P. Morgan, wasn't allowed to get into one of these clubs that he wanted to, and eventually he created his own club because he had so much money, later down the road. So, but there's a fascinating history of how this all works out at Harvard, for Harvard College. All right. So the schools can put pressure on these clubs. So the schools can say, you know what, in debate class, in government class, or in geopolitical, politics or international affairs class or regional studies, you can have vigorous debates, respectful. You can have a student that's pro-Palestinian, even pro-Hamas, and you could have pro-Israeli student, in that class, respectfully, debating the topic of the day for that course. It is not right for a student to disrupt the class to the point where the students feel that they're unsafe and that the teacher loses control of the class and can't teach. That's wrong. The problem is that these teachers are allowing it to happen. Why? Because 97% of the faculty at Harvard is ultra liberal or liberal. Only 3% are conservative. So they're as long as you're pushing a liberal agenda, they'll let you speak. So that's just wrong. The second issue is that if a student comes in and disrupts the class that it didn't even register for the class, that should be a suspension because you're not supposed to be disrupting classes. Also, the university should have a policy. You can't shout out a speaker when there is some sort of event that's taking place at some sort of in one of the halls, lecture hall. All right. And let's say Alex Jones decides to go to Harvard and talk about, some sort of, conspiracy theory. And there's a group of people that bought tickets and, everything was approved. And then all of a sudden you got these ultra liberals coming in, shouting it down, and it becomes a free for all and they cancel the event. That shouldn't happen. So the ones that were shouting out and trying to shut down the event, I think that should be grounds for dismissal for these students. The university can do that. It's not about free speech because their free speech is shutting down other people's free speech. So there's a deeper dive into exactly the actions that the university should be taking, that they can take, that are legal. Another issue that should not be happening on campus at Harvard and some of these other universities is when a student is going from one building to another and going through the yard or walking on campus, there should not be an amalgamation of people protesting something. I don't care what it is. It could be, Pepsi versus Coca-Cola, Palestine versus Israel. I don't care. They shouldn't be able to do it because one, it can get out of control, property can be damaged, and people can be hurt. It's a private school, and there is a code of conduct for these students. It doesn't have, their freedom of speech isn't protected in the yard. That's a private property. If they want to have, speech, the university should not should not be controlling these students if they're off campus. That's their own thing. And, the freedom of speech, governed by the state and the federal government. It's not a Harvard issue. But if it's on campus, Harvard can control it. And so you can create an environment where it's more respectful. And by creating an environment that's more respectful, you'll have people that can start talking to each other normally instead of being in fear and just shouting all the time. That's what these universities should be doing. They don't want that because they want to do oppressor and oppressed. They want to create a division, oppressor and the oppressed. And guess what? Jews are put into the category as they're the oppressor. Because this is all about BLM. Mark my words on it. It's about BLM and pushing this gay pride agenda. That's the problem. And unfortunately, Dave Portnoy isn't smart enough to fucking say it. But he won't hire a Harvard grad. All right, we're going to go to Bill O'Reilly. What is interesting with Bill O'Reilly? There's behind the scenes. Again, like I said, I know a lot because I've had a very, very interesting life. All right. Bill O'Reilly was a major donor for Catholic Charities. All right. Major donor. All right. Catholic Charities was somewhat tied with Fox News. So this was when he was on Fox. All right. Before he was kicked out. And he was supposed to do a lecture at the Harvard Club and he fell ill and couldn't attend and it was never rescheduled. And if you notice, ever since then, I have not been able to see hear his voice normal. There's something weird about his voice. Now, I don't know what, I don't know if it was COVID related. I don't know. Maybe he had some surgery. Maybe he's losing his voice because, he's been a broadcaster for so long. And if you talk for decades, you'll start having problems with your vocal cords if you don't train your vocal cords correctly. So, maybe that's it. But, I have this tangential, connection to to Bill O'Reilly, you know, but he's an interesting guy. I don't agree with everything he's saying, but there's a logical side with him. So let's just play this clip. I just thought that was important to mention that, you know, he is a very philanthropic individual, extremely philanthropic. I'm not going to say how much, but extremely philanthropic.
Destruction of the Jewish state on the campus at Harvard, Cambridge, Massachusetts, then those people would have been arrested, not expelled, arrested. Okay? So now we have the progressive left calling for Hamas to be let alone, and Hamas wants to exterminate Jews. What is the difference? The difference is ideology, which Ms. Gay embraces with gusto.
Yep.
Yeah. Look, she advocates a pretty racist ideology as well. Everything is defined by race. The oppressed, the oppressors, on and on and on. Let's look forward though, and you've been able to see the arc of the culture war for so long. Is this the reckoning, if you will, of DEI in the same way as BLM was the reckoning of race? Is this now going to be the reckoning of DEI? Who replaces Claudine Gay? Is it just another search for a black woman who writes about race?
I don't know that. I mean, the board of trustees at all of these universities are left-leaning primarily. There's very few conservative or traditional people that work at any of the major universities, and certainly not on the board of trustees. Ms. Gay is a committed progressive person. That's what Harvard wants, or wanted, but your question is a good one. This is a turning point for the progressive movement. They're on the wrong side.
Yep.
They're on the side of the killers.
Yep.
That's whose side they're on. And people clearly see that. It was like BLM management in LA taking the $90 million in donations and buying lavish homes for themselves. What else do you need? Do you need anything else? So it is a turning point. The progressives are falling apart. Their handpicked president, Joe Biden, is absolutely self-destructing. The fact that he will not even negotiate about the border when Ukraine and Israel aid hangs in the balance shows you how incompetent Joe Biden is. He simply doesn't care. He's going to keep that border open no matter what.
Yeah,
And
we
it's shocking.
talked about
It is literally
we talked about
shocking.
the-
I saw it.
See, here's the thing.
Well,
Here's the thing. Pardon me, O'Reilly, as I interrupt you. All right. You have this ultra left agenda in the United States where it wants to destroy the currency, it wants to destroy the manufacturing prowess, and it wants to destroy the borders. And they believe in this idea of a North American, South American union. That's what they believe. They want what they did in Europe, they want to do with North America, Central America, and South America. It would be like the the Amero or whatever. That's the long game of this. The problem is that it's going to water down the Constitution. We're going to be less safe. We're going to be less productive. And the real essence of what America was is gone. But they don't care. They don't care. Short term, they'll make some money. And they promote an agenda that they believe in, like it's some religion. But these events that have taken place, that I said that when the cloud starts over the rest of the world on December 1st, that there's going to be a lot of turmoil, and that there's this energy flux. I know this sounds crazy, but there's energy flux that started on December 1st. Like a metaphysical energy flux that started on October 1st, or not October, December 1st, and that people that were sensitive were able to gain knowledge, gain understanding, gain more spiritual strength from it. And the rest of the world is going to be cursed unless they start looking into themselves and becoming a better person. The ones that don't, the curse starts to get darker and darker. The ones that have picked the right side will get a blessing. And it's playing out. You see this. No one could have, like I said, on August 1st to November 30th, the sensitives had some tumultuous times in their life. Some very serious, but they sensed that something was coming. Now that darkness has passed over the sensitives and is now on the rest of the world. Who would have been able to think that, you know what? Oh my God, you know, all these things that are playing out that happened right after December 1st. And I called this months ago, that there's this darkness that's coming. And there's this disentanglement between the conservatives and this liberal world that we're living in. And that it's about God, country, and family. And if you're not on that side, you're gonna be fucked. Trust me on this. And it's gaining speed. It's gaining momentum on this. It's gaining momentum. And the tail is gonna be eaten by its head. And the ultra-liberal agenda is the world is gonna see the fallacy of it. And we're seeing it play in real time in the news.
The thing is, I asked Bill Cassidy, who I think is a pretty, you know, as politicians go, a pretty honorable guy. I said, all right, when you get Chris Murphy and other Democrats back, you know, in a corner and say, hey, like, what's really going on here? They won't even talk about it. They won't even negotiate.
No.
The
They
issue.
pull a Gavin Newsom.
Yeah.
They pull a Gavin Newsom like, we don't want to talk.
Right.
Let me just make one point.
Go
All
ahead.
right. Tonight, Biden's, you know, making money in Philly tonight. That's what it is, a Hanukkah thing tonight. He could sit at his little desk in the Oval Office and write an executive order that says very simply, again, I'm a simple man, the United States will not take any more applications for asylum for 12 months because we are so backlogged and overwhelmed. We will not take any more applications for asylum for a year. That will put it to rest. Boom. Stops. Is that hard? No.
No,
it's
no,
not.
the deal is very simple to make. I want to get back though to the DEI thing because we were going down the road of is this the end of DEI? You say they're on the side of the killers. Fareed Zakaria has been getting a lot of praise for what he said on Sunday about what universities should do. I thought you might have some thoughts on it. Take a listen.
America's top colleges are no longer seen as bastions of excellence, but partisan outfits, which means they will keep getting buffeted by these political storms as they emerge. They should abandon this long misadventure into politics, retrain their gaze on their core strengths, and rebuild their reputations as centers of research and learning.
Am I being too cynical to think that when there was BLM and even many years before that, it was universities that were going to be the center of progressivism, and now suddenly when there's a cause where the progressives are on the side of the killers, as you said, now universities should all take a step back?
Well, he's late to the table, but his analysis is correct. This began during the Vietnam War.
Yep.
This whole thing in the late 60s, early 70s. I was at Boston U getting a master's in broadcast journalism at the time. And it has progressed to 2023, now to the tune where 97% of Harvard professors are liberal. Self-proclaimed, 97%. You cannot run an educational institution in that way. Look, I went to Marist College, Leland, to get a history degree. I'm overeducated. I got 2 masters and 1 BA. Marist College went back when I...
You want to know what overeducated is, dude? Is how many degrees I have. Fucking. All right. O'Reilly.
There during the Vietnam War was a working class bastion. It gave kids like me from a working class home in Levittown an opportunity. It was a fabulous school. And even during the Vietnam turmoil, it maintained, all right, at least some decorum of fairness.
Yep.
Marist College is a lunatic asylum. That's how much it's changed. Not just Harvard.
Right.
It's not just Columbia,
It's everywhere.
Cornell, MIT. Right. It's everywhere.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation.
And the thing is that it is everywhere in the United States, in the colleges, in the universities, but it's also in the corporate setting, either low level or even the C-suite, where you have this wokeism, the bitch boss is what I call it, right? You got this wokeism that's happening with these HR departments. So it's in corporate America too. That's a problem. Now, the difference between, let's say, Harvard and let's say a state school, all right, is that these Ivy League universities have remote campuses in other countries, like Qatar, like Saudi Arabia, like China, like Singapore, right? So they have these distant campuses where they're afraid that if their student body may go against the agenda that's in these countries or the politic that's going on in those countries, that they may get a blowback in terms of funding, direct funding that's going to the university and its home campus, its headquarter campus, or the funding for these remote. So they're in a position to try to placate. It's all about placating to donors. It's all about money. And if the money is foreign money, they'll placate to the foreign interests. And when the Department of Education starts to investigate what's going on at Harvard, they'll start to shine a light on this entanglement. Remember what I said, after December 1st, a dark cloud is happening around the world. And that people that have been doing wrong in society and destroying God, country, and family are going to get cursed. And that if people don't make it right and do self-correction, the curse is going to get worse on them. And you're seeing it happen on Harvard right now. The committees, the board of trustees and the Harvard Corporation is scared shitless of this investigation. Because what people that listen know about Harvard is only the surface of what's going on in terms of the entanglement of these foreign interests. It's just, we only know the surface. It's a lot deeper. Now, where the complication comes in is that they're entangled with the CIA. MIT's entangled with DARPA. So even the US government is involved in this bullshit. So it's not so clean cut. All right. This is Rabbi Wolpe. He resigned just recently. So let's play his interview that was on the BBC. It's 7 minutes long.
The short answer is that I felt as though I was not capable of making the kinds of changes that would justify my continued presence and my continued work.
Why not?
Because I think it's clear that the ideology of what we call wokeism and attendant anti-Semitism is deeply rooted in the culture of Harvard and other elite institutions. And in order to extirpate it, it's going to take an act of will that I'm not sure any of these schools is yet prepared to undertake.
Wokeism, anti-Semitism. I mean, what's the link, and how does it manifest itself in your?
So the link in this sense is not a recognition of oppression, which I think is important. But once you begin to divide people along axes of oppression, black more oppressed than white, women more oppressed than men, LGBTQ more oppressed than straight, and all of social policy and outlook and research is then plotted along this table so that you can understand who the good guys are and the bad guys are, not only in certain historical circumstances, but in every conflict, in every situation, both foreign and domestic. You get inevitable distortions because people just don't fit groups that way. And Jews don't fit this model in any way, because here you have a group that have been historically as oppressed as any group in history, and yet, at least in America and in other places too, are doing very well. And therefore, they have to be plotted on the oppressor side as opposed to the oppressed side. And that's why you got those bizarre, cognitive, distorted protests the moment Israel was attacked, and letters saying, obviously, Israel was responsible for this attack because the idea that Jews could suffer or be oppressed couldn't fit the matrix.
Of course, all this has blown up this week because of those exchanges in Congress. What was going through your mind when you heard those exchanges?
The congressional hearings certainly highlighted the inability of the leadership of these institutions to speak plainly about what everyone recognizes is going on there.
And why do you think that was?
Casting blame is always the easiest thing to do, so I'm tempted to say, get the lawyers. I really do think that a lot of this was the legal whispering of, we are a big corporation, there are lawsuits waiting in the wings, don't say anything that could be construed as in any way deeply meaningful. But I also believe that part of it is that the universities have gotten to themselves into a terrible pickle, in the sense that they spoke out about racism and then realized that this was a slippery slope, that if you start to speak out about one issue, then when you have another issue that might be more contentious, you have to speak out about that too. And so they began to try to retreat into, well, free speech, we don't take positions. And that was so transparently hypocritical that they were stuck in a position, I think, from which there was no graceful exit.
I mean, it is, as you say, a pickle. I mean, it's a sort of Gordian knot, isn't it, of rhetoric? But the congresswoman from New York, Elise Stefanik, what do you think she was referring to when she talked about calls?
When I said the dark cloud happening around the world on December 1st, and the tail being eaten by the liberals, this is what I mean. You have leadership that aren't being leaders. And this is why President Gay from Harvard needs to be forced to leave, to be removed. Either fired or, do a resignation. It would be better if she was fired. But, the thing is leaders don't walk on eggshells. Leaders don't go, lawyer, what should I say in Congress? Well, it's very obvious what the moral code should be. If you don't have that moral code as a president of a major university, then you shouldn't be the president of that university. Obviously, there's something that you've lost in terms of God, country, and family. It's a moral fiber. You lose those three, you don't have a moral fiber. And so you can't think on your feet. You didn't even have to go into that hearing and be prepared by lawyers. All you had to do was speak from the heart. Now, if your heart is so dark and you only support BLM and faggots and not other people that are oppressed, then you're biased.
A genocide. Was she referring to slogans at pro-Palestinian marches? Is that what she was getting at?
Claudine Gay had condemned the statement from the river to the sea. The actual slogan essentially means to make Israel Judenrein, without Jews. It should be one Muslim state, like all the other Muslim states in the Middle East. And that was the call, that and Intifada, globalize the Intifada. Well, Intifada is armed revolution. So when Jewish students hear from the river to the sea and globalize the Intifada, they hear that as an explicit threat. And so for the president to say that is an actionable offense, we would have to throw people out who did that in front of Congress, would mean a disruption the scale of which we have not seen on college campuses. So I think they were trying to avoid falling into that.
Is this new? I mean, have things got much worse since October the 7th?
I'm tempted to say it's the return of the repressed. I believe that this was already there, as many public events, such as the George Floyd murder in America, as many public events tend to catalyze underlying social divisions. This did. As people in Europe know very well, anti-Semitism has never disappeared. Certainly Jews in Britain feel it, Jews in France feel it. So I think that while this was a catalyzing event, we were not starting, sadly, from ground zero.
No, I didn't mean that anti-Semitism new or has suddenly come back. I suppose I meant that this wrestling with the issues of freedom of expression and where the lines should be drawn. Has that really come to the fore, do you think?
I think it has very much. I think that people were struggling with it when the question was racism, but the general social trend was so overwhelming, and America had neglected to grapple seriously with certain parts of its history so seriously that people were able to override the objections of, you can't make everything about your political opinion. They did, and now are paying the price.
And just finally, I mean, how does an institution like Harvard get out of this? I mean, surely it needs people like you to be taking part in efforts, even if they're not wholly satisfactory, to try and sort this out.
Well, if I thought that these efforts were liable to bear fruit with my help, I would certainly continue. But my problem in particular was that I'm seen as a representative of the Jewish community. I'm not a Harvard insider. And so the Jewish community was constantly saying to me, we see you're on this panel. We see nothing is happening. Is that because you don't care you're doing nothing? As one person said to me very wisely, you should not take a job that has accountability but no authority. And I felt like I was accountable for Harvard's decisions, but I couldn't do anything to change them. So I have made it clear that I would be willing to continue to help, but an official position puts me in an impossible position. And so I wanted to make a statement that I didn't think that things were going the way they should, and this seemed to me the most effective way to do so.
All right, so that's Rabbi Wolpe.
The short answer is that I felt.
All right, so now, when you have agendas that destroy religion, when you have agendas that destroy country, and you have agendas that destroy family, you will have a society that is going to spiral out of control. And that is exactly what we're seeing today. It is not okay to, if you look at the arc of what's been going on with the whole Pride movement, it was equal rights for homosexuals. Okay. I mean, that, there should be equal rights for people. But then it moves towards the projection of that lifestyle onto a straight society. So it wasn't equal. It's more now they want superiority. Then it gets to the point where it's actually affecting the children, where there's this gender fluidity that's going on. And there are multiple issues with that. But it's destroying the family unit. It's not okay. It really isn't okay the way Anderson Cooper lives his life. It's not okay. It's not okay the way Buttigieg lives his life. It's not okay. It may be protected by the Constitution, but in terms of social dynamics, it's not okay. It's about God, country, and family. And you start breaking that, you break society. And I am not wrong on this. But, you support, these universities will support people that can't pull their pants up, and walk around. And then you have a dumb society out there that thinks it's okay to have this legalized drug culture now in America, where now the population is docile and the government and these institutions can take advantage of you now. It's not okay.
Decision on whether or not Harvard University will fire its president, Claudine Gay. That decision could come as early as today, but there's a lot of speculation that the school could actually let her keep her job. Nearly 700 faculty members signing a letter defending her, saying, quote, "We, the undersigned faculty, urge you in the strongest possible terms to defend the independence of the university and to resist political pressures that are at odds with Harvard's commitment to academic freedom, including calls for the removal of President Claudine Gay. The critical work of defending a culture of free inquiry in our diverse community cannot proceed if we let its shape be dictated by outside forces," end quote. Shabbos Kestenbaum is a second-year grad student at Harvard. He joins me now. Shabbos, here's the moment on Capitol Hill that started it all. Watch.
The answer is yes, that calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context.
Wow. What's it like?
And it's not just what she said. It's not just that she said it depends on the context. It's that fucking smirk on her. It's that liberal smirk. Oh, I'm going to outsmart you, Congresswoman, even though you went to Harvard.
Faculty members that teach students exactly like you apparently think calling for the genocide of Jews is, quote, free inquiry.
Yeah. So who knew that in 2023, calling for the genocide of Jewish people would be considered context dependent according to the best academic institution in the world, and the individual who calls for that is able to keep their job. So the faculty letter talks about the importance of resisting outside political pressure. And I would actually agree with that. I'm hardly a billionaire, but I certainly welcome open discourse concerning the university's hiring and firing practices and their fair enforcement of the student conduct standards, something that we have not seen before. I'm also one of 1,000 current students and alumni who called for the president to resign. So what I would ask those faculty, and I certainly disagree with
Like
them,
I said on Thursday when I was started to cover this, I think it was Thursday, maybe it was Friday. I said that, every time I'm at the club, at Harvard, it is a forceful conversation on why President Gay for Harvard needs to be removed, because she's a failed leader. And that if the alumni doesn't push back on this woke agenda, then the university's reputation is going to go down. But it's even bigger than just the university's reputation. It's the soul of the fucking country that we're fighting. We need to hold the line and make sure that we protect the soul of our country. It's God, country, and family versus an ultra-liberal agenda that wants to destroy your religion, that wants to destroy your family unit, and wants to destroy your country. That's what's at stake here. And its leaders, it just so happens, a lot of them, the really important leaders that really make a big difference, that do the right thing, actually come from Harvard. But they're a small minority. And we're always getting pushback from people that didn't go there, thinking that we're all holier than thou. Do you understand that you're watching and hearing the person that literally blew the whistle on the biggest event that happened in the last 125 to 150 years? But you'll listen to a fucking asshole like Malone, who actually was part of the weapons program. But you have leaders that try to do the right thing to save the country. Meanwhile, Malone collected a check as a consultant for the weapons program. But you'll listen to Malone and you'll watch those celebrity docs. But they're not leading to save the country. They're leading so they can be an expert witness on the injury. That's what's going on, but you play right into it. The public needs to wake up. It's God, country, family.
To number one, talk to us, talk to Jewish students and see what our experience has been the past 3 months. And then I would also ask them, what if this was a different minority? What if Claudine Gay had said this about Black people, about gay people, about Asian Americans? Would you be as defensive as you would be now? And let's also be very clear, under Claudine Gay's leadership of the last 3 months, there has been an almost complete destruction of Harvard's reputation, a loss of more than $1 billion in donations, 2 different congressional investigations, calls for further federal action, charges of plagiarism and falsifying her own data in her dissertation, a total moral abdication of leadership. So I'm confused as to why people ask me why I think that she should resign, as opposed to me asking them, why should she stay?
Shabbos, you're asking for basically an open dialogue. That's what it sounds like you're asking for.
Now,
Seems like
now
the
you know,
Harvard
here's
president
what's important here. I'll roll this back, but it's really important because in the video, and I'll try to explain it to the people that are in spaces because they can't see the video here. All right, this is in the Science Hall, November 29th, right? And in the Science Hall, there is a cafeteria area called the I think it's Clove or Clover. I think it's Clover maybe. And it's like an all organic, student run cafeteria kind of thing. There's really good food actually. In the winter, here's another backstory. In the winter, when I was on campus, I would always have the tomato basil soup, and they have this really good piece of bread that they provide with the soup order. So that was my favorite in the winter. And then on the other side of the cafeteria is like a coffee house, right? And then right next to that, adjacent to that, is the library. So in the Science Hall, in the foyer area, right where the cafeteria people are sitting for Clover, or Clove, I can't remember the name of the I think it's Clove. They have this bullhorn and all of this pro-Palestinian horse shit while people are eating. Public space, right? You can actually get into the building. There's a lot of visitors that walk around on the Harvard campus and do tours and stuff. So this is for the students and for the visitors. This should have been shut down by the security. Security's all over the place at Harvard, at the door and all this. They should have shut that down. This is what I mean. This is exactly what I'm saying. This is not about free speech. This is a projection of an agenda. And to get people to be docile for them to move in. The university should have shut that down and said, this is not the place for it. If you want to have some sort of debate, do it in debate class or do it in your international affairs class, respectfully, if the professor doesn't lose control of the class. Should not be happening at the cafeteria. But this right here, this was when I was talking about these students from the college, and I was coming out of class. I think it was in 2018. Could have been, January of 2019. I can't remember, but it was somewhere around there. I was coming out of class in this foyer area. We're lined up a bunch of pro-abortion students while we were coming out of class, because in the background and surrounding the cafeteria are halls, and they're lettered. So like Hall A, Hall B, and then downstairs is like I think it's Hall E, and then upstairs is the labs, like the organic chemistry labs and the molecular biology lab upstairs. But the thing is that these fuckers they're going out of control. And they have so many people that are surrounded by this bullhorn guy, black, pushing a pro-Palestinian agenda. They're not even Palestinian. This is what I'm saying. It's this BLM that has infiltrated this thing, and then now it's trying to project this oppress culture on campus. The university went wrong, and they should have shut that down. And this very picture is emblematic of what I was explaining with the abortion bullshit that was going on in 2018.
That's what it sounds like you're asking for. Seems like the Harvard president and the faculty asking for the same thing because they're all shouting about free speech. So it's important to take these latest rankings into account. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression ranking Harvard last in its college free speech ranking. Quote, first of all, Harvard, which on paper commits to protecting free speech, has a dismal record of responding to deplatforming attempts to sanction students, student groups, scholars, and speakers for speech protected under First Amendment standards. Of 9 attempts in total over the past 5 years, 7 resulted in sanction. Shabbos, where was the Harvard president and all these faculty members when the students came to those faculty members complaining that their voices on campus were silenced?
It gets even better.
That's a great question.
Anti-Trump is rampant over at Harvard and the faculty. Major. I made, for the ones that are still listening on X, I did a stunt at the main library, the Whitner Library, and I had all these stickers from Alex Jones and InfoWars, and I put them on my laptop, right? Because all these students are these ultra liberal types, and they all have these, like, you know, end fossil fuel, you know, bumper stickers on their laptop, or, you know, pride stickers, or, you know, some other, you know, BLM stickers. So just to make a statement, you know, I said, you know, there were stickers that I got from InfoWars, and it had like InfoWars, you know, get fluoride out of your water. 9/11 was an inside job. You know, support Alex Jones. And they went ape shit, total ape shit when I did that. The MBA school, the HBS, all right, Harvard Business School, the alumnus were trying to have Steve Bannon's HBS degree rescinded because he was a supporter of Trump. Now, it didn't work. Picau said that, you know, that we shouldn't have a student body attacking people because they disagree with the new zeitgeist of the students, especially an older alumnus like Stephen Bannon, right? I believe he got his MBA probably in the 80s, maybe early 90s, all right? But you have a student body that thinks that if you disagree with me, I'm going to try to pull your HBS degree away. Your Harvard degree is going to be taken away if you. Now, Picau, who was the previous president, said, you know what? I'm not going to file suit with these crazy students trying to force me to rescind a degree that was rightfully earned by a prior student. But what happens when you have a ultra liberal like President Gay at Harvard? Is she going to file suit with the same policy as President Picau? Maybe, maybe not. So now what they do is they try to create a chilling effect on the alumnus that are pushing back on the ultra liberal. Now, do you understand the complication that's happening? Do you now fully understand the complication that's happening? Not everyone at Harvard is evil. There's actually people that are trying to save the fucking country that come from Harvard. So wake the fuck up.
question. I mean, I certainly welcome the sudden interest in commitments to free expression and the First Amendment, but we have to keep in mind that this is a president whose university mandates that all students attend the Title IX training, where they are told that cis hetero sexism and fat phobia are forms of violence. Using the wrong pronouns as a form of abuse, where Ronald Sullivan, who was a beloved professor, was fired representing an objectionable client, where only 3% of the faculty openly identify as conservative, and as you said, ranked 248 out of 248 universities when it came to free speech. So the fact that we would love to do something for Jewish students and protect Jewish students, but we just can't because we have a commitment to the First Amendment, when you and I both know that Harvard does not have a legal obligation to protect students who are engaging in violent rhetoric concerning Jewish students, and they don't have historical precedent of ever enforcing these policies to begin with. Just last year, when a student was engaged in a homophobic incident, he was condemned almost immediately and he was expelled. A couple of years ago, when you had about 10 different students who were accepted, and it turned out that they had submitted racist posts on social media, the university suspended them and rescinded their acceptance. Right. So the fact that when it comes to Jewish people, all of a sudden we wish we could do something, but we just can't because of the First Amendment is breathtaking in its hypocrisy.
Claudine Gay has apologized for congressional testimony, but it's important to note, Chavez, this wasn't a slip of the tongue. This was testimony that.
Breaking news: the name of the organic cafeteria is Clover. All right, so I was right. So you know, I think the student's from the divinity school. I'm not sure because the graphic is on his shirt is partially covered, so it's hard to see the shield for his school. Each school has a different shield. But you know, here's the thing. There's a bias at Harvard, but it's not just Harvard. It's most of the schools around the country, and this is even infiltrated Fordham. And Fordham, when I was there, was very conservative. All right, but there was one or two incidences that there were swastikas that were, you know, painted in the bathrooms or spray painted in the bathrooms, and there was, you know, some anti-Semitic rhetoric. If I remember, it was during the summer classes when I was there for my pre-med. So this is happening around the country. Gets a little bit more complicated at Harvard because you got CIA. You know, you have CIA and government flow through that university, and MIT is complicated because you have DARPA. So there is this, you know, people are treading on thin ice because they're not really sure how this thing's all going to blow up. People need to start waking up. It's about God, country, and family. And the woke agenda is fully engaged to destroy all three of those pillars.
Literally prepared by a top-notch law firm, and she's apologizing for it. Obviously, there was some forethought that went into it. She was wrong. Now she's trying to walk it back to save her job. Chavez Kestenbaum, thank you for your time this morning.
Claudine Gay,
as always.
President Claudine Gay should be forced out, and hopefully it happens today. All right, now this is interesting because, you know, I had the Crimson come after me when I was trying to warn the public in January of 2020 of the crisis that was emerging. And I had professors that were talking to the Crimson, trying to discredit me, saying that there's no lab involvement and that these universities weren't tied to it. There were several universities that were tied to Wuhan. There were several universities that were tied to a biological weapons program. And so you had these professors trying to protect their grant money, their involvement, and then all of a sudden the whole Lieber thing blows up. And how he was connected to Wuhan, and he wasn't declaring that he was working with the Chinese, and the amount of money that was being funneled to him. He made approximately $1.75 million by working with the law. And he didn't even serve his whole full sentence. He was let go. But this is all happening at that time. And so the university was trying to position themselves to protect themselves. And they were trying to throw me under the fucking bus using the Crimson. All right. I had everything fucking recorded and have it, stored on, different methods, and it's out there. All right. On what exactly happened. And they tried to railroad me and make me into some sort of crazy conspiracy theorist. And they were going to create this article where their professors were trying to disprove what I was saying. And they would give me only a little piece of the article, while the majority of the article would be heavily towards the opposition, these professors. And I demanded in the interview that it should be equally weighted. Now, how's that? See, there's a similarity here. This wasn't a woke issue. This was actually a weapons program issue. And they wanted to cherry pick to try to create a narrative. That's what the Crimson does. How do I know? I lived through it. Now, I was smart enough to be able to fight back and had the moral character to not like, well, I'm going to walk on eggshells. No, I'm going to be forceful and I'm going to win. That's how you get the job done. So we have to keep in mind on what these universities do and what these student bodies do and what these professors do and how they really work. They try to stack the argument. And that's what has been going on with this whole woke oppressor and oppressed thing. It's very similar. It's very, very similar. And oh, by the way, fast forward 4 years later, and Dr. Paul Cottrell was fucking right 100 fucking %. 100 fucking %.
For a year on the job, Harvard President Claudine Gay is now caught in the middle of a firestorm for her comments at a congressional hearing about anti-Semitism on campus. It's already cost University of Pennsylvania President Liz McGill her job, but as of this recording, Gay's employment is still up in the air. That's as one of the school's two governing boards, the Harvard Corporation, met today in the wake of some major donors pulling their funding to the school, demanding that she step down. Meantime, many faculty members have since come out in support of her. But what do Harvard's students feel about all of this? Well, to discuss that, I'm joined by Claire Yuen, staff writer for the Harvard Crimson. Claire, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I know you've been covering this topic for a while now.
Yeah, my co-writer and I, Miles Herzenhorn, we write about central administration at the university. So it's really our job to talk with President Gay as well as Provost Garber, the governing boards. Of course, you mentioned the Harvard Corporation, and also the second highest governing body is the Board of Overseers. And so, we've really been following them and watching them. Obviously, nothing this year has come even close to how massive of a moment this is. And also would love to mention Elias Shizgal, who actually wrote about the faculty support that you mentioned. Also just, it's been such a big collaborative effort to really get this covered.
It sounds like there are a lot of hoops to jump through, given all of those layers of administration, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, you mentioned that we do know that the corporation is meeting this weekend. We've reported basically anything that's happening right now, the support that President Gay is getting, and still the criticism she's receiving is all in the context of we are waiting to see what the Harvard Corporation is going to do. They could do what the MIT Board of Trustees did and come out in very firm support, or, as you mentioned, President McGill did not necessarily face quite the same, strength of support from her Board of Trustees. So it's all sort of in the background of that. But, the corporation is kind of a secretive body. They don't necessarily tell people that they are meeting. They are not very open about necessarily what is being discussed. But I think it's a reasonable assumption that this is on the docket for today.
When you saw the testimony on Capitol Hill, as someone who's been reporting on this for a while, what were some of your takeaways? What did you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we actually, Miles, another reporter here at Rockaway, and I did a lot of the reporting around that day. It was a long day of watching a very long testimony. There were times when certain representatives were repeating lines of questioning that were almost identical to ones, their colleagues had repeated hours before. By the end, you could clearly see that, like President Gay told us, right, one of the reasons why she said that last exchange with Representative Elise Stefanik didn't go quite the way that she wanted it to was because there were so many questions, and the sort of barrage of questions and in sometimes a very aggressive manner made her sort of lose the grounding principles that she wanted to return to. I think some of the takeaways we had were certainly that, Elise Stefanik, Representative Stefanik, really sort of took control in a lot of moments. A lot of her colleagues ceded time to her. But there were also moments where several of the presidents, including President Gay, kind of pushed back against some of the accusations that were put forward. For instance, they mentioned the fire report on freedom of speech on college campuses, which had Harvard last. And on a couple occasions, President Gay said she firmly, rejected that characterization of the situation on campus.
So we know that since early October and the conflict in
This
Gaza,
is for the ones on Spaces and the ones that are watching this through the different channels that I have, the 6 different channels. This is Greater Boston, right? And they're interviewing a Harvard Crimson reporter or editor, and both of them are minorities. The Crimson reporter is Asian, and the news anchor is black, and both of them are female. I would like to know, on the spectrum that Rabbi Wolpe was talking about, do they feel that Jews are on the oppressed side or the oppressor side? Do they feel that Asians are on the oppressed or the oppressor side? Just remember, Harvard didn't like too many Asians in the student body. What about the news anchor? Where does she fall into this spectrum before they even talk? So you know where they stand. Do they stand for God, country, and family? Or do they support these ultra liberal policies? That's really important to understand, because believe me, there is major bias when it comes to these organizations. They're not middle of the road. They're not Walter Cronkite. This woman that's talking, that's Asian, that's part of the Crimson paper, she's not Walter Cronkite.
Really been a conflict in and of itself. We know that students have been involved as well at campus with protests and things like that. What has that piece of it been like reporting on, but also students with differing ideologies?
Yeah, no, it's been a tense time on campus, and I think that's something we've noticed, since October 7th, tensions really spiked. Right after that, there are obviously a lot of students on campus for which this is a really, really personal issue. And in a lot of ways, that anger was also sort of fueled, I guess, by a perceived lack of support from the university on both sides. This desire for the university to do more to combat hate in all of its different forms and to make sure that students feel safe. And
what's happening with the student body, because they're a bunch of fucking liberals, is that they wanted the university to say, oh, pro-Palestine and support the oppressed that's in the Middle East. That's what they wanted, because they were used to hearing it, that the university was siding on BLM. This would all go away if the university said in these more open spaces on campus, you can't protest, period. We're going to start, giving some behavioral lessons to the students because they don't know how to behave. So when they go out into the real world, they actually know how to behave. Because here's the problem. When these students, if they don't know how to behave and they go out to the real world, then you have the corporate America and you have the clubs that are pushing woke agendas. And you're seeing it right now. You work in corporate America and you got the bitch boss because of DEI, because of affirmative action. So in these public spaces on the campus, these open spaces, it's private university. It's privately owned. You may have people roaming around, but they could clamp down on this really quick. Believe me, there are a lot of security in Harvard. They could shut this thing down in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. They let it happen. They let it happen.
Like you said, there have been a lot of vigils and protests and rallies on campus. We've reported on some that have happened very, very recently. It's something that is still an ongoing issue, and certainly President Gay and her administration is facing a lot of criticism from students for not doing more.
There's also been some, criticism in terms of who gets to call the shots in terms of when a president is being called to step down. Is it donors? Is it students? Is it faculty? Is it one of the other many boards that Harvard has? And we know that, there's been an op-ed in the Boston Globe really calling that into question, and other reporters have reported on that. What's the sentiment among students around that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think
pay attention to her. Pay attention to her logic. Remember what the student body, what the alumni body tried to do to Stephen Bannon, and rescind his degree from HBS because he supported Trump and he ended up being in the White House for a short amount of time, as an advisor to the president. And I know of people that were petitioning and they had people sign it and they presented it to the university. I know that happened. I saw it with my own eyes. See if she says anything about that. Or does she only focus on, you have these alumnus and you have, these corporate tycoons that are pushing back and asking for her to resign, and even Congress is, suggesting that she should resign. Let's see how she weaves that, the full historical context here.
Students on campus, given what happened with President McGill at UPenn, really a lot of attention on the Harvard Corporation, in particular, senior fellow Penny Pritzker. We want to know, is senior fellow Penny Pritzker going to have that conversation with President Gay asking her to step down, or is she going to come out in support? As senior fellow, she sort of speaks for the corporation. It indicates the corporation's support. We've seen in the past when former President Larry Summers was asked to step down, that was, senior fellow at the time, James Houghton, had a conversation with him that preceded his resignation.
All right, let's do the horse. I'll roll her back so you get the full context. But it's important to remember what happened to Larry Summers. He was president of Harvard. And what did he say? He said, you know what? There are differences between males and females. And he was pushed out. But guess what? Biologically, that's true. That's a fact. Males and females are different. It's not about superiority. It's just they're different. But he was kicked out because he didn't, he was pushing back on this woke crap that was going on. Sad thing was when Zuckerberg stole Facebook from the twins, Larry Summers was the president that had the opportunity to kick that fucker out of the university. But now what we have is this social media bullshit that's out there now that he could have killed it in the crib.
what's happening at UPenn and what's happened previously at Harvard, it's kind of all eyes on the corporation at this point.
And you mentioned the corporation can be secretive.
Let me roll her
I
back,
can't
so I
imagine that
interrupted
students
her.
or
It's
folks
not
who
fair
really
to interrupt her.
Indicates the corporation support. We've seen is Senior Fellow Penny Pritzker going to have that conversation with President Gay, asking her to step down, or is she going to come out and support? As Senior Fellow, she sort of speaks for the corporation. It indicates the corporation support. We've seen in the past when former President Larry Summers was asked to step down, that was, Senior Fellow at the time, James Houghton, had a conversation with him that preceded his resignation. So in general, based on what's happening at UPenn and what's happened previously at Harvard, it's kind of all eyes on the corporation at this point.
Yeah, well, you should
And
have
you mentioned the
a similar
corporation
policy.
can be
What happened
secretive.
to Summers?
I can't imagine that students and folks who really are calling for transparency, I can imagine they can be frustrated with that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that I think the average student doesn't know a lot about, but because of the large spotlight on UPenn after what happened with President McGill, I think people are maybe directing their attention a little bit more to what's going to happen with President Gay after this weekend.
Do you think folks are also thoughtful of, President Gay is a historic figure in Harvard, first Black woman to lead the school. Do you think that that's a consideration among the students? Like in terms of the call for her to step down, maybe some folks will say, let's give her some grace. She's only been in the job for half a year, something like that.
Right. No, I think that's definitely something that people on campus are very aware of. Obviously, when President Gay was selected and when she was inaugurated, that was a huge moment on campus for students, faculty, and also alumni and affiliates who maybe even weren't even on campus, but were just so proud of the university for making this historic step.
Why then, when they did the simulcast for her speech, for her inauguration, only one person showed up at Harvard, New York City Club? Why? If there was such wow, we got President Gay. You know what it was? She fit a profile that's DEI. And Ackman is 100% right on this. She is a failed leader. She's a failed leader. Get rid of her. She happened to be the dean of the largest group in the university. So she had a lot of clout, and she hired a lot of liberal faculty members.
We haven't done a ton of reporting on how students have been very vocally supportive, because in a lot of ways they haven't. People are locked down into finals. It's a crazy time on campus for students. Everyone's just sort of in the library. But we have seen that a lot of faculty, especially this weekend around Sunday evening, really rushed to support President Gay. There's a lot of desire to give her some grace, pointing to the fact that she did tell us in an interview that she was sorry for the remarks that she made. And a lot of faculty have said that
she's only sorry because there was blowback. That the ultra-liberal tail is eating itself. She's only sorry because people like myself and a lot of others are stepping up to the plate and saying, you know what? This liberal fucking agenda needs to die.
certainly mistakes have been made. Certainly not everybody is happy with how things have been going, but perhaps the call for her to resign is taking it a little bit too far.
Do you think depending on what happens after this meeting with the corporation or the discussion with the corporation, do you think that will embolden, any sort of anti-Semitism, or have there be, or the opposite would happen on campus, where you're going to see one group feel like they're the prevailing opinion? Or is there a thought around that?
I'm not sure I can speak too well to that.
Yeah.
I think there is.
Has any of the groups spoken to you all and been like, once this happens, this will happen in terms of the groups that would be protesting on either side?
I think not necessarily anything recently. There were certainly groups that, students have occupied University Hall and made various demands, but I don't think there's anything major recently yet.
Yeah, we'll see what happens after this meeting. Claire, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Good leadership is rare. And you can't assume that because you're a DEI candidate that you're going to be a good leader. Just because you have academic credentials doesn't mean that you're going to be a good leader. And not just that. There were many founding fathers for our country that came from Harvard. And she is shitting on their grave because she doesn't believe in God, country, and family. All right, we're going to go to Stephen Miller and Cottrell on Fox Business.
The founder, American First legal president, and former White House senior policy advisor. Steve, good to see you. Let me start. I've got a couple of things for you today. Appreciate your time. Beginning on this border deal, quote unquote deal. I mean, why should anybody waiting for asylum or other so-called entry arguments, why should they wait in the U.S. where you're never going to see them again? What is wrong with going back to remain in a favorable country? For example, Mexico, okay? To me, that should be a Republican Senate requirement for anything that goes on. What do you think?
Without a doubt, the core demand of the United States Senate must be an end to all release of illegal aliens into this country to await some hypothetical future court date. This notion that the entire developing world across Latin America, across Africa, across Asia, have some sort of right to enter our country criminally in violation of federal law and demand transport to the destination of their choice is the end of American sovereignty. This is a line Republicans must hold. If you enter this country illegally, you will not be released. And for the Democrats that are saying that Ukraine aid is the thing that the whole civilization depends on, the thing that all of democracy depends on, then you have to ask them, if it's that important to you, then you're really willing to say that you're going to walk away from the thing that you say all of democracy hinges upon because it will reduce illegal immigration? That's how much you obsess over and want illegal immigration? It just shows you how sick the Democrat Party has become.
Yeah, look, fine. If the Democrats obsess about helping Ukraine, then they know what the key is to opening up for that help. And that is to say, no more illegal immigration, no more asylum, no more asylum. That, this word asylum has been so badly used, it seems to me. I mean, it sounds like people running away from communist, socialists. Sometimes they are, a lot of times they're not.
It's a total con. And Larry, I'm glad you mentioned that, and I want to take 15 seconds to explain why this is a con. Let's say you're an illegal alien coming from Senegal, and you transport yourself through 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 countries on the way to the United States and demand asylum. Every single country you pass through, you could have requested asylum from.
Right.
The notion that you're being persecuted in this country that you come from, but that you have to demand asylum in the world's richest country is an absolute violation of asylum law. The law of asylum says you apply in the first safe country you enter through, whether it be Mexico or any other country. There is no forum shopping for the richest country. The country that will give you the most free healthcare, the country that will give you the most free education, the most free housing. No, if you're actually being persecuted, if someone's actually saying, I'm going to kill you because you're this race or you're this religion, which is never the case with these migrants, but pretending it were, you apply in the first country that you enter where no one's trying to kill you.
You think Republicans, Senate Republicans, so far they've held the line. Do you think they will continue to hold the line on the asylum issue, on the Remain in Mexico issue? By the way, Steve Miller, I would probably toss in that. Of course, resuming the wall would be a very good thing to do as well. But also, there was never any substitute when Title 42 ran out.
Yes.
There was no health substitute. And there's no shortages of health issues that should prevent people from coming across the border willy-nilly without being checked out. So, question is here, I want to move on to some of the more difficult anti-Semitic issues. But Steve Miller, what will the GOP hold tough in the Senate, in your judgment?
Well, first of all, amen and yes to everything you said. And secondly, I can only say that I hope and pray they will. Do not show any weakness. Do not show any gift. Do not show any bend. As we said, Larry, make it very clear. If you want this Ukraine loan, if it's as important as you say it is, this is the price of admission. End of story.
All right, Steve, we're going to have Alan Dershowitz on later in the show, but I know, you're very keen on this issue of the awful spread of anti-Semitism. And I know that your think tank, First Legal, has looked into this. Wouldn't this be a good time to really start cracking down? Let's go after the Department of Education. Let's go after, funding and various forms of grants to these colleges, which are permitting hate speech and bullying in the form of anti-Semitism and probably elsewhere as well. Wouldn't this be a good time to investigate all of that, really put this thing out into the open, not let it slide, but go after it right now?
Absolutely. So there's two things that need to be done right away. Number one is you need to abolish all of these DEI departments, right? This diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's the generator of this anti-Semitism on college campuses, right? The idea that Jews have too much, that they have too much wealth, too much power, too much influence. It has to be taken away from them. They're the oppressor, that they're the conqueror. So you have to get rid of those departments completely, and you say no federal dollars would be done. Secondly, we have to look at the whole way we fund higher education. The principle of funding higher education is the idea they're doing important science, they're doing important medical work, important technological advancements. If they have left that mission behind to pursue radical left-wing Marxism and socialism, to crush merit and meritocracy, then why is the federal government funding these elite Ivy League schools with their multi-billion-dollar endowments at all? If they're not going to actually do the things that there's a public interest in doing, then why give them any money?
Why give them a tax-exempt position?
Damn straight.
What do you think of that?
Yes, no, they should not be able to operate tax-free hedge funds if they're going to use it to try to push cultural and social Marxism on this country. Which
this is a great point. This is a great point because that's another thing that the Board of Trustees and the Harvard Corporation is scared of, is losing their taxes exemption. See, what it is that they're doing things that are at a corporate level. Basically, Harvard is a hedge fund with books. That's what Harvard is. And to think that all this research is coming from Harvard is any better than really, some good state schools. You know what? The reality is the good state schools are coming up with just as good research, if not better. So, let's just basically the educational system in terms of quality, is just as good, and the research is just as good. It's the perception. People have this perception that New York is so great. The reality is New York's a shithole. It's a shithole. It literally, the blacks that can't pull up their pants shit on the MTA train. Literally. This is not figuratively speaking. New York is the shithole of liberal policy.
Texas for everybody else. You have to appreciate the university to get tax-free treatment. Will they train a generation of young people to demand that you and every other American be taxed at a higher rate?
Yeah, he's right about that.
Steve Miller, thank you.
He's right about that. Okay, so The Business Insider, I'm going to read this article and then I'm going to play a video from Larry Summers. Business Insider wrote this article 6 hours ago. All right, Larry Summers says the ongoing turmoil about anti-Semitism at Harvard is as serious a reckoning as the Vietnam War. And you got to remember that Harvard was, tied into this whole Vietnam thing. In the regional studies, and a lot of the advisors for Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson, who came from Harvard, the whole war plan for Vietnam came out of Harvard. All right, and we know how that all turned out. Larry Summers once served as Harvard's president. He told Bloomberg that Harvard's anti-Semitism row was would be as tough to manage as the Vietnam War, perhaps more difficult, Summers said. An ex-Harvard president says that managing the ongoing row about on-campus anti-Semitism is a serious reckoning for the Ivy League university. This is a difficult moment for elite higher education as any moment since the Vietnam War, perhaps more difficult, former Treasury Secretary Larry H. Summers told Bloomberg in a story published on Monday. Summers previously expressed disappointment at Gay's initial silence after Hamas launched a vicious attack, a terrorist attack on Israel in October. The silence from Harvard's leadership so far, coupled with a vocal and widely reported student group's statement blaming Israel solely, has allowed Harvard to appear at best neutral towards acts of terror against the Jewish state of Israel. Summers wrote on X on October 9th, referring a pro-Hamas letter that was signed by a group of Harvard student organizations. I am sickened. I cannot fathom the administration's failure to disassociate the university and condemn this statement, Summers said in a follow-up as a follow-up post. Gay eventually condemned Hamas attack on October 10th. Okay, now let's, I'm pausing and I'm going to do a little critique here. All right, October 7th happens, and then Gay finds out that she has some sort of moral courage on October 10th. You know what? Moral courage is on the day of the attack. President Gay, you need to be forced to resign because you are a failed leader. All right, back to the article. Summers declined to comment when contacted by Business Insider. I'm not sure why, maybe it just didn't fit his schedule. Harvard has found itself in a spotlight in the past 2 months for its approach toward on-campus anti-Semitism, and the university's president, Claudine Gay, was forced or has faced growing calls to resign following her congressional testimony on the topic last week. During the hearing, Gay was reportedly asked if calling for the genocide of Jews violated Harvard's rules on bullying and harassment, and it can be, comma, depending on the context, Gay replied. And then obviously, I'm not going to read the rest of the letter, but then Ackman starts getting involved, and the Pfizer chief starts to get involved. And well, this is important. I didn't know that Pfizer was involved in this. All right, so let me continue reading. Gay's response drew widespread backlash from politicians as well as business executives such as hedge fund manager Bill Ackman and Pfizer chief Adam Borla. In her short tenure as president, Claudine Gay has done more damage to the reputation of Harvard University than any individual in our 500-year history. Ackman wrote in his third open letter to Harvard's leadership where he called for Gay's removal. Okay, I'm not going to finish the reading of this. But all right. So there is some serious pressure going on. Now, what I want to do is I want to show a video of Larry Summers on Bloomberg 2 months ago. Okay. And then that was on Fox, and I want to play on Bloomberg, and then I'll have my little end of speech. All right, let's see here. This is Bloomberg
Port
Television.
Miami is the world's largest cruise port, and currently we're the 10th largest container port in the United States. By 2030, we expect the majority.
Larry, thank you so much for being here. You heard the description there. You did take issue on X, as it's now called. Explain to us exactly what you found objectionable, at least in Harvard's initial reaction.
David, the statement by 30 student groups blaming all violence on Israel was a moral absurdity that appeared to reflect views at Harvard. And I thought it was very important that the Harvard administration, the Harvard leadership made clear that those students were not speaking for the Harvard community. And at the same time, in the same way that previous leaders flew the Ukrainian flag over Harvard Yard after Putin's invasion, in the same way that Harvard stood with America after 9/11, I thought it was appropriate for there to be a strong Harvard statement condemning in the strongest possible terms Harvard-Hamas terrorism. After a couple of days without such a statement, I expressed my view publicly, having expressed it privately before. There was an initial statement that, frankly, I wasn't very strong and didn't distance Harvard from the student group. And now I'm glad to report that President Gay has condemned terrorism in strong terms and has distanced Harvard from the 30 student group. So the kind of leadership response that I was looking for has now happened. There's still a lot of uncertainty and confusion. And so
for the
these
ones that
not
are
gonna
just
be-
logging in, especially the Spaces, I'm playing a Larry Summers on Bloomberg. To get full context, you have to listen to or watch, the previous coverage on this through this video and audio. But this Larry is talking about what was going on with Harvard 2 months ago. So, keep that in mind. And then we're going to talk about what's happening now.
Easy days to navigate, and there are agonizingly difficult questions around the response. On the one hand, there's a right of self-defense and a right of response. On the other hand, when Hamas is using human shields, is using hostages as human shields, there are incredibly difficult questions about the appropriate and prudent and morally right response. But it seems to me that if university communities want to make their contribution to that debate, the necessary precondition is that there be absolute clarity of the kind President Biden provided yesterday in the condemnation of terror. And that's why I have been so disappointed, I have to say, in the collective response of America's academic leadership to what has happened. If universities wanted to take the position that they didn't respond to the issues of the day, that they focused on pure scholarship, I could relate to that position. I think there are arguments for that position. But given the number of issues on which leadership at Harvard and other universities have spoken out, to fail to speak out with equal vigor when it is terror towards Israel was, I thought, a real moral failing. And I'm glad to see that Harvard has adjusted its position, and glad to see that
to varying extents, other universities are responding.
Yeah, and Larry, you're not alone in taking issue here. Your fellow Harvard economist, Jason Furman, has spoken out as well. But also we have Bill Ackman, who says it's not enough just to speak out at this point. We should know the names of the students who participate in these statements because future employers should take that into account in their employment. Do you think it should go that far?
Of course they go to commercial.
Port Miami is the world's largest cruise port, and currently we're the 10th largest container port in the United States. By 20.
I think Bill's getting a bit carried away. Look, David, this letter was issued 6 hours after the attacks. Many in the groups had no idea that there was going to be a letter. Some who probably signed their groups on didn't fully know what they were signing. Some, I'm sure, were naive and stupid. I don't think this is a time for individual.
That's profound, saying a Harvard student is naive and stupid by Larry Summers. Maybe not everybody in the organization, but definitely the ringleaders. Definitely the ringleaders, because they knew what the fuck they were doing. They knew.
Vilification. It's not a time for demonizing Israel, and it's not a time for demonizing students who weren't careful or who were silly in what they did. That's very important to maintaining a community. Bill's entirely right. I would do the same thing as he does in wanting to make sure that the people I hired weren't people who stood with hate. But asking for lists of names, that's the stuff of Joe McCarthy, not the stuff, not what I think.
The leaders of those organizations should be held accountable because they knew what they were doing and they were part of this woke agenda that's happening at Harvard. It's about God, country, and family. And these institutions need to start producing people that are leaders, that are protecting God, country, and family. And not allow for these student bodies to get out of control in these open spaces on campus. In debate class, in a course that is focused on, let's say, Palestinian-Israeli conflict and that sort of stuff, and have an open, vigorous debate, I think is prudent. But for students to organically create mayhem on campus and create the problem that we're seeing today can be stopped right now. But the university doesn't want it. You got to remember, on the yard, if you do something that looks like it's out of place, you're going to have a security guard, or the university has their own police force. All right. And then there's the there's the Cambridge police force. So there's two police forces that govern that area. All right. In 30 seconds to 60 seconds, they could stop something from happening in the yard. They didn't do it. They allowed it to happen. There's the problem. There's the problem. The university wants this crap to be happening. They want to create the division between the oppressed and the oppressors. And they think that Jews are part of the oppressors. And the oppressed are the homosexuals and, the blacks. And they just blame white males and blame Jews. That's the student body that you have today. And they're just reverberating what they're hearing from their professors, because 97% of the university professors and adjuncts are a bunch of fucking liberals.
Strong business organizations or universities like Harvard should be doing. I think we've got to keep a sense of proportion here. We've got to keep the temperature down. There are incredibly hard questions ahead of us around the response
and they're not going to be any good answers, but we may find less tragically bad answers if we can recognize the clear moral lines, and then beyond that, support open debate.
Larry, you, of course, are a former president of Harvard. You're a renowned macroeconomist, former Treasury Secretary. It's awfully early going, I know, but as a macroeconomist taking a look at this right now, do you have any anticipation of what this dispute, this war in Israel may mean for the global economy?
If it doesn't spread, I don't think the global macroeconomic consequences will be large. There may be some positive impact on the price of oil. There may be some tendency to move to safe havens like U.S. bonds. But I think the effects will not be large as long as this conflict stays contained. But we don't really know fully about the Iranian nexus with respect to this conflict. We don't know about the possibility of spread involving Hezbollah. And so I don't think we can be confident as yet that the conflict will remain contained, much as we might hope for that.
Larry, as you say, there can be no excuse for some of the things we've seen reported coming out of Gaza. There just can be no excuse for it all. At the same time, there are some underlying issues on the West Bank as well as in Gaza with Palestinian people. Do you see any room for hope that maybe ultimately coming out of this, there could be progress in the area?
Look, you never know, David, and it's often darkest before the dawn, and I'm no expert on the politics of that region. Seems to me terribly important to distinguish Hamas, which is a creature of terror committed to the destruction of the state of Israel, from many Palestinians who have legitimate claims about the lives they have been forced to lead. And I hope that a prudent Israel will give no quarter to Hamas terror, but will at the same time recognize that there are many Palestinians who do not stand with Hamas terror, and that ultimate peace depends upon arrangements that reflect their need to live lives with opportunity and security. And that's what we all have to hope for.
You know, that's all nice and dandy, Larry, you know, who's Jewish. But the reality is he's not a practicing Jew. So, you know, there's a little bit of liberal bullshit with him. The bottom line is this. Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran need to be taken out, or we're going to be kicking the can down the road, and it's going to get a whole lot worse with unconventional warfare. So it's time to get it done now. By the way, the world, the liberal world, the Westphalian, you know, order that Kissinger has written so much about needs to realize that the UN should not be dictating to Israel the covenant that it's had with God for thousands of years. And the audacity for liberals or non-practicing Jews or a UN body to say that they supersede the covenant is beyond hubris, and probably will cause consternation in their own lives through a curse. The bottom line is this. You got to knock out the terrorism, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. And the surrounding countries need to start coming to grips with a new border. And that new border is a larger Israel that's taking parts of Lebanon, parts of Syria, and parts of Jordan, and parts of the Sinai Peninsula. And that the West Bank is going back to Israel, and Jerusalem is going back to Israel. and the Palestinians can have a very prosperous life that can be well funded in Gaza Strip. Level the whole damn thing and rebuild it and make it look like it's Monte Carlo. But Israel is going back to the covenant land borders, and the Temple Mount is getting rebuilt. And all this happy-go-lucky stance in this Westphalian world cannot be applied to the problem that has been brewing since Jacob and Esau. That's the answer, Larry. And oh, by the way, the backstory. You know, when I was interested in writing papers and doing lectures on economics back in the day, when I finished my Ph.D., I was part of INET. I saw Larry Summers 3 fucking times in person. These people aren't as bright as you think they are. You know, and speaker fees. That's amazing. I met him in Toronto, and I met him in Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, where there was an INET conference.
It was out of the terrible Yom Kippur War that came the Camp David agreements, and perhaps again it will prove to have been darkest before the dawn. That's what we all need to hope will turn out to be the case. But right now, we have had unconscionable terrorism, and it would be a real mistake to suggest symmetry at a moment of this kind.
All right, so now that was the Bloomberg take on this. This is the Fox News take on this. Also published 2 months ago. To give context,
statement blaming Israel's former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers. He was once the president of Harvard. He's calling out the school. He says the silence from Harvard leadership, coupled with a vocal and widely reported student group statement blaming Israel solely, has allowed Harvard to appear at best neutral toward acts of terror against the Jewish state of Israel. Harvard put out since a mild statement on the war. In my opinion, the elites have just turned into a bunch of cowards. Maybe that's a bit strong, but what say you?
But they just seem very comfortable with being anti-American allies. It just makes sense to them. I don't get it. But I did see a Gallup poll, and I watched this as things were spinning up, and Benjamin Netanyahu was coming here to speak at the UN. And I was doing an interview with the NATO secretary, and I started looking up different sentiments when it came to the Palestinians. And it turns out the Palestinian and their cause has more popularity resonating with the 35 to 45, 25 to 45-year-olds among the Democrats in our country. It was totally reversed, 24% approval. Now they got 54% approval. Now, for Larry Summers to spend most of his time at that institution and not realize the pro-Palestinian movement at that institution at Harvard, and act just aghast now, is somewhat surprising, because he had not been paying attention to some of the messages going through his political science department and for this next generation. I agree that he's upset, but I cannot believe he's really surprised by that. Anything anti-American or anti-American allies, they are thoroughly comfortable with taking on. There's also, by the way, pro-Palestinian movements at the UK too. Do you see some of those demonstrations?
Yeah, I saw it. I think there's a rise of anti-Semitism amongst younger people, and that's a terrible thing. Brian, out of time. See you again real soon.
It's anti-God. It's anti-family. It's, anti-country. That's the agenda. So, those are the videos that I chose to pick for this critique. Okay. So now there are going to be 2 Dr. Paul Cottrells. There's going to be the Dr. Paul Cottrell that was the Harvard graduate. with a master's degree. All right. And then there's going to be the Dr. Paul Cottrell from Detroit. All right. The Dr. Paul Cottrell from Harvard University. Speaking to President Claudine Gay. President Gay, you know, as an alumnus of Harvard University, and, you know, watching this whole mosaic play out, I feel as an alumnus that you are a failed leader and that you should do the right thing and resign from your office as president. In addition, because of your tenure as dean of one of the largest departments at Harvard before you elevated to presidentship, your decisions to bring on liberal or ultra-liberal faculty members has demonstrated to the alumni that your long-term leadership skills are a failure, and that those decisions that you made years ago with faculty members is part of the reason why you have a student body that is causing the reputation of Harvard to be tarnished. And therefore, this is another data point to heavily suggest that you should step down as president. What are you doing, or what have you done as dean or as president, because you haven't been president for very long, where you are actually solving the problem that we have in so many different universities, not just at Harvard? And that is this continuous division between the oppressed and the oppressor. I think it's very clear, if you look at it in the final analysis, you are a DEI candidate that elevated to the presidentship. It had nothing to do with your leadership skills. It was because you had a power play, because you were a dean of the largest group within Harvard University. And you had a lot of support by a very liberal faculty. 97% of the faculty is liberal or ultra liberal. That means that only 3% are middle of the road or conservative. How can you have literally an open debate of free thought within the student body and the faculty when you have a faculty composition that is so biased to one side? In this case, liberalism. And in many cases, ultra-liberalism. And because of your lack of leadership, you demonstrated in front of Congress a lack of empathy for students that are on your campus that do not feel safe. You also demonstrated a lack of empathy to truly understand the atrocities that took place on October 7th. What about this? Why haven't I heard from you about how Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran are major actors of terrorism in the Middle East and around the world? You thought that you could lawyer up, get prepared, and that everything would be blowing over after your congressional testimony. But you got clipped by a Harvard alumnus that was a congresswoman. And you had this smirky look about you, that you had this know-it-all attitude because you felt that you lawyered up good. But leadership isn't lawyering up. Leadership is taking a stance that may be very antithetical to your student body or to your faculty. Not calling the atrocities that took place on October 7th and beyond an absolute genocide of what, you know, of the Jewish people, I think is just, it's unconscionable. You do not have leadership skills, period. You've only been in the office for what, 3 months, 4 months? And literally the university is looking at 2 major audits by the government. Major donors are pulling $1 billion from the university. You have done more damage to the university than any president ever for Harvard. And you did it in 3 to 4 months. Again, a DEI candidate that was elevated to presidency. You did not have the leadership skills. You may have the academic skills, you may have the teaching skills, but you don't have the moral fiber to be the president of Harvard University. And that is why you are having so much pushback. Now what's going to happen is that there are going to be congressional investigations showing some of the nefarious things that are going on in the university. And you know what? It's time for, you know, the light to shine on it. But you didn't have the moral courage to change this whole dynamic on campus because you fell into the trap of oppressed and oppressor. You fell in the trap of CRT. You fell in the trap of the BLM movement. You fell into the trap of this idea that it's okay to rile up a bunch of students and faculty members as long as it's going against whites, going against males, going against Jews. But if the shoe was on the other foot, and this was against blacks or against homosexuals, your tune would be much different. Oh, and it has been different. The university is not being consistent. And this is going to lead to lawsuits. It's going to lead to congressional findings through the audit that there are a lot of bad things going on. And this is the end of wokeism. And you represent it. And therefore, you need to resign. When I saw that you were elevated to the presidency, I was thinking, you know what? This is probably one of those affirmative action cases, and just give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she'll turn to be a good president. I had no idea because they announced you being president a year ago. But the cow took, you know, it took some time for the cow to actually step down. And I was giving you the benefit of the doubt. But I know that the people at the Harvard Club of New York are disgusted with the way you're running the show. Absolutely disgusted. And not only that, during your inauguration, there was only one person that actually saw the simulcast. One person showed up at the Harvard Club. For the ones that are watching, you know, there was a simulcast of your inauguration at the different Harvard clubs while you were doing your speech on campus. People are not happy with your leadership, and nor are they happy with the wokeism that is starting to emerge out of the university. Now, granted, I am a more conservative alumnus, but I have an arc of history, you know, and I'm seeing the country falling. And it takes leaders to stop the fall and to correct it. And you're not one of them. You're not one of those leaders. We need leaders that actually say, you know what? We want vigorous debate about policies and perspectives in our classrooms that are respectful. We want people that are going to be guest speakers and not to be shouted out of the lecture hall and cancel the event. We want a university that is producing high quality researchers and individuals that are productive for the society. What you are promoting is division, destruction of the family unit, destruction of the belief in God, and the destruction of this of country. You wouldn't have had the opportunities to elevate to where you have elevated to if it wasn't for those hardworking Americans building the country that we have. But you came here as an immigrant to have that American, future, that American, piece of opportunity. But literally under your tenure, you are eroding that very thing that your parents and you came to America for. You're against God, family, and country because of your policies. That is another example of a failed leader. If you can literally say honestly that an ultra-liberal agenda, the CRT agenda, the BLM agenda, the ultra-liberal agenda strengthens families, strengthens God and country, strengthens our constitutional rights, you're living in a dream world. And if you're living in a dream world, you shouldn't be president of Harvard. You should be a teacher in creative writing. You're a failed leader. And failed leaders need to be need to be fired, or you need to resign. You need to step down. You represent not just a prestigious university that has minted many, many important American figures, especially the founding fathers of our country, and you tarnished it because of your failed woke policies. And now conservatives are pushing back. You know the phrase, go woke, go broke? Well, it's happening to the university right now in the tune of $1 billion. In a tune of $1 billion. I hope you're happy, President Gay, because you failed. You failed. You're not used to hearing that. You're not used to hearing that because you're used to affirmative action. You're used to DEI. You're used to failing forward. You failed. You failed miserably. You tarnished the name. And you tarnished this country. You tarnished this country. Do you understand how the gravity of this? It's not about the university. It's more about the country and what kind of students you are minting. You're not paying attention to corporate America and the politic of America. It's moving in the wrong direction with this wokeism. We're becoming less productive, less viable. The university used to be a bastion of people that actually served the country. When you walk down in the campus and in the yards, what are some of the phrases that are on the buildings? This is dedicated to the veterans, you know, for World War I or World War II or Civil War. But in your mind, with your woke attitude, what you're more worried about is promoting BLM. You want to put on these new buildings, this is dedicated to BLM. Not the veterans that died in the Civil War or World War I or World War II. Harvard and the country are linked together. And you tarnish one, you tarnish the other. It's wrong. And because you're a failed leader, you need to step down. You've lost the confidence of the alumni. You've lost the confidence of the leaders in corporate America. And you failed the students. You didn't give them discipline. You know, you don't go just to the university just to get knowledge. You go to the university to actually become a more productive citizen and a viable citizen, not a crazy liberal that's burning down the town. So, President Claudine Gay, take my advice. It is best that you step down before the shitstorm happens and you are forced to resign, because the shitstorm has started and it's going to get worse. Now, that is the cordial Harvard University graduate with a master's degree, Dr. Paul Cottrell. All right. Now, what would Dr. Paul Cottrell, the Detroiter, say to President Claudine Gay? You know, because Dr. Paul Cottrell was born and raised in Michigan, went to Wayne State University for his undergrad degree and for his master's, for his MBA. All right. Automotive engineer, did some really cool stuff when he was younger, right? Traveled around the world, knows a lot about, you know, world affairs, right? Before he ended up in New York managing portfolios. All right. So the Detroiter, Dr. Paul Cottrell from Wayne State University, would say, President Gay, you're a fucking idiot. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. You know why? Because you failed. You failed. You were put in a position, given a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of prestige, and you fucking failed. Get the fuck out. Get the fuck out. Why are you tarnishing the university and the country? Because it's about you. It's not about the university. And you're hiding behind a bunch of liberal faculty members and liberal students that sign letters saying they support you. Meanwhile, talking about bias sampling, 97% of the faculty members are a bunch of liberals. Of course you have so many people supporting you, because they believe in the same crap. They believe in the idea of, you know what, it's oppressed. It's the oppressed versus the oppressor. And they're pushing the CRT bullshit. And they're pushing the BLM bullshit. And failing forward is a virtue. Meanwhile, your university has all this memorabilia and memorials about people that served the country in World War I, World War II, the Civil War. And my city, Detroit, produced the bombs, the bombers, and the tanks that fucking killed the Nazis. And that manufacturing prowess that came out of Detroit. But it was your stupid students that decided to gut the manufacturing in America and made us weaker. Now it's time to push back. So, as the Detroiter, Dr. Paul Cottrell has words of advice to President Gay. Get the fuck out of here. Thank you for listening. And it's now time to support Dr. Paul Cottrell and his different channels. So for the ones that are listening and the ones that are on Spaces, please go to all 3 channels on YouTube. I'm heavily censored when I cover like way long. All right. And please subscribe to Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Links are in the description of this video. Please tell your social network, follow this crazy guy. All right. I have a lot to say that's accurate. And it is profound. And it exhibits leadership skills. So please have your social network follow. Make sure that you follow on all 6 channels because of the censorship with YouTube. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, so you're not a crazy liberal. All right. And how do you do that? You follow my protocol. All right. What are some of the things that you can get on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com? Get silver gel. It is a structural nano silver gel that neutralizes pathogens, and you can use it as a skincare product. I also have structural nano silver soaps. I have 5 different varieties. This one happens to be lemongrass. It's a high quality soap, neutralizes pathogens, and oh, by the way, you can use it as a gift for the holidays. Maybe I'll send some structural nano silver soap to President Gay. Lignans. This is a powder. It boosts up your immune system and your hormonal health. It's for males and females. Take this. You're going to need it. Turbo cancer's coming. Structural nano silver soaps and lozenges. This one is lozenges, but I have a 20 count for the structural nano silver lozenges. This is menthol, but I also have it in green apple, and I also have these structural nano silver drops. I have it in honey lemon and blueberry. 100 count. They're smaller than the lozenges. I have a 35 ppm silver gel in a quick dispenser that you can have in your bag. Put it on your hands, neutralizes pathogens, so you don't contract crazy liberalism. Magnesium and zinc, very important, boosts up your immune system. If you're not feeling well and you're starting to get sick, better boost up your immune system, take a double dose of it. And multivitamins, very important. It's the cofactors for enzymatic activity. If you don't have the proper cofactors, you're going to have subpar enzymatic activity and metabolism. So those are some of the products that I have. My protocol, my anti-aging protocol, and the boosting of your health is based on 3 pillars. Liquids and gels, structural nano silver liquids and gels, like Max 35, will reduce that pathogen load, so your body doesn't have to be chronically fighting these things. All right, and so it'll bring down that pathogenic load. So it neutralizes those pathogens. You take that every day. You take a teaspoon of structural nano silver liquid, either Max 35, Max 14, or the silver solution. The other pillar is a very strong antioxidant that soaks up free radicals. That's C60. I have it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, and an 8 ounce in coconut oil or avocado oil. All right, you take a teaspoon of that a day. It is a very strong antioxidant to prevent cellular stress, and it boosts up the mitochondrial health, so you have more ATP, so you can have more energy for your immune system. You need a lot of ATP, especially if you're sick. All right, and the third pillar is bringing down inflammation. You bring down the inflammation by taking turmeric and ashwagandha. Ashwagandha controls blood glucose levels. reduces that inflammatory response with a high glucose count, right? And turmeric will bring down inflammation. It's also an antioxidant. Those are the pillars. And then you add stuff to it, like the zinc and the probiotic and the digestive enzymes and the collagen and the B vitamins, the B complex. I have a lot of products to offer. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and support my work. And it supports your health. You follow my lead. I've been taking a lot of antioxidants all the way since I was 16 years old. I am a lot younger than in terms of look compared to my peer group. All right. And a lot healthier. So follow my advice. I know what I'm doing. All right. And over time, throughout the decades, there's been things come into the market that improve the protocol. And I've incorporated it into my daily routine. I'm not telling you to purchase something that I don't use. I use all this stuff. All right. So just follow my lead and you're going to get healthier and you're going to slow down the aging process. I've told you multiple times on how to improve your skin. You know, with the collagen, the vitamin C, and drinking the 64 ounces of filtered water and adding in resveratrol and C60 and why that all works. And using the silver gel on your skin and leaving it there on your skin overnight and the next exfoliate in the morning. I've told you so many things. And I've also navigated you through the crisis that is affecting many, many people in the world and how to navigate through that. So please support my work by going to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and getting those products that I'm telling you to get to improve your health and to slow down the aging process. You can also donate on my website through Stripe or PayPal. On my homepage, the-studio-reykjavik.com, there are links that will allow you to donate. You can also donate through Buy Me a Coffee. That helps us support the news coverage. Everything I do is free for everybody. All right? All the news that I talk about, all how to navigate through the crisis that we went through in 2020, all that is free. All of it. Thousands of videos are for free. And that's through the people that purchase my products and have supported my work over the years. That's why it's out there. But it's the right thing to do because leaders do the right thing. Putting stuff behind a paywall is not being a leader. If you have something important to say, especially that can help people financially or through health or to improve the country, don't you think it should be for free? So start being a little bit more discerning on who you support. Are you supporting leaders? Are you supporting egotistic individuals that don't really care about you or your family? They just say it. And they probably don't even follow the things that they tell you to do. There are many people that you would think that are, individuals to follow in terms of lifestyle, and they have terrible lifestyles. I live what I preach. All right. I'm very legit. All right. I mean, and you can just you notice that I don't do scripts. I just talk on how I feel because it's from the heart and people realize it. They see it. And that was the very problem with President Gay and the other two presidents. They were lawyered up and they just were robots, did not really talk from the heart. It's context dependent. That's not a leader. You want to support leaders. So stop supporting people that are behind paywalls. And please go to, if you can, for a nominal fee, you can support my work also through Patreon. I have a Patreon channel that I post, and that support helps to just keep everything free. Nothing's behind a paywall. Nothing's behind a paywall because all the content that's there is free on other channels. So, and that's because of the support that I have through the community that I've built over the years. Thank you for your support. I appreciate it. And President Gay, You are a failed leader. It's time to step down. Thank you for listening and have a nice day. And President Gay, I suspect that you're going to be out of the job pretty soon.